Welcome to Our Next Existence by Katie and the Chorus. I'm Katie, former technology strategist turned reluctant spiritual medium, and I channel messages from the Chorus, a group of beings just beyond our sensory perceptions who are loving, expansive, and who greatly enjoy sharing their perspective of us. Join us each week as we share and discuss their ideas about humanity's existence, purpose, and future. Concepts you can draw from to accelerate your path, expand your perceptions, and ultimately step into the flow of the universe and your life. Sometimes when I sit down to write or to podcast, I ask myself, am I creating or am I obligating? Do you know what I mean? Am I in the present moment and am I creating something right now? Or am I feeling a sense of obligation? Is that what brought me here? Did I sit down because of a deadline? Did I sit down because it was too long from another episode? Did I sit down because someone said, when are you going to send out another episode? Or even worse, am I obligating myself to the thoughts that I've already had about this thing? Am I feeling the words come up within me in this moment? Am I creating? Or am I feeling a sense of obligation to the idea I had 2 days ago while I was driving to the grocery store about what I could say in this episode? Am I creating or am I obligating? And I can guess what you're probably thinking, which is that creating is clearly preferred. We should all be creating all the time. Maybe that's true. But as I've spent years with the chorus, I've started to feel like it's not necessarily about judging one to be better than the other, though we do have preferences. It's a little bit more about just seeing it. Seeing that there's a thing that we do called obligating, and then there's another thing that we do called creating. And that sometimes they even go together. Sometimes I sit down because I've been obligating, but while I'm here, I create. That both obligating and creating accomplish something. In today's message, the chorus talks about beliefs that we hold about needing to be liked, needing to be approved by others, and how that's had an impact on our experience here of limitation. It may not seem like an obligation at face value, but for those of us who have grappled with wanting to be liked in order to achieve or to do something that we would like to do, it can kind of start to feel heavy, like an obligation, like one that weighs us down and keeps us from soaring to new heights and reaching our dreams. That's what we'll talk about today. In the first part of the episode, you'll hear directly from the chorus themselves, and then afterwards, we will discuss. But you are, of course, not obligated to listen to any of it. We are with you, beloved ones. We are with you. We observe you. We are aware of you throughout your days. Do you know that for us, nothing is more fascinating than observing you all in your process of awakening? We understand that humans often have a sensation, an idea that you call perhaps being liked or popularity, and that you often feel as though if something that you decide to create is going to be successful, the best indication of that success would be in its popularity. That should you write a song, it is only extraordinary if millions of people also like it. If you create a blog, if you write a speech, if you have an idea for something in your jobs, the true measure of its incredibleness is in how many other people also like it. From a certain vantage point in the five senses perspective, we can understand how this might be true. For, as we have discussed, you have so many rules, so many beliefs about needing to agree. And so, what better way to measure your own success and perhaps to predict it than by way of counting the number of others who also like what you have done? From our vantage point, however, this works very differently. The success, the energy of a thing that you create is measured most aptly by the sensations that it provides and reverberates through your entire being. The freedom that you seek is possible in everything that you create, for you become a master of your own expansiveness. And that invincibility, that feeling of being infinitely liked, becomes, in a sense, self-generating. You do not need to wait for others to approve of what you have done, nor to celebrate it, in order to achieve those extraordinary sensations of infinite connection to infinite creation in greater and greater layers of expanding into the unique creation that you are. It can feel so satisfying, so delightful to relish your own creations, your own desires, your own preferences, the ways that you want a thing to be and to be created into. So much so that you, at times, may forget to care whether or not anybody else likes it. And in that way, you expand into an even greater delight in the opinions of others. For you know that as you encounter them, those opinions can do nothing more and nothing less than to provide contrasting experiences which will clarify for you your own preferences and will accelerate you on your path of creation. And now that we have said all that, we would like to add something that perhaps will assist many of you in understanding the ways that you feel. At times, Each of you may have had or have sensations of being watched, of being observed, that your life should be perhaps more interesting, more exceptional than it is. To explain the thoughts and the desires that you have to be famous. From a five senses perspective, you could say that this is another version of what we just spoke about, your need to agree, your need to be liked. And this is true. But also, we would like to point out that humanity is very popular, that you are being observed by many more than you yet understand, and that you are teaching all of us. You are surrounded by fans who are applauding everything you have done here and all the steps that you are taking in your awakening. And should this have not yet been made clear, we would like to say this now, that we are here, we support you, we celebrate you, and we are so looking forward to meeting you. We love you infinitely. The irony is, before I recorded that message, I was checking how many downloads the podcast had. What's the point of making something that isn't liked, if it isn't well received, if it doesn't help somebody? Have you ever said that to yourself? Have you ever heard somebody say that? As you know, we're about to release our book. And I had to sit here and ask myself, do I really not care if it's popular, if it's liked? If the book isn't bought by a single person, would I still have written it? I think most of the time the answer is yes, because it's been an incredible experience. But there is still a part of me that hopes that somebody somewhere gets something out of the book. Sometimes when I talk to friends about the chorus and what they're saying, and we start to catch a glimpse of the incredible universe that is beyond this experience, there's a moment they hit, and I've hit it too, where there's sort of a disappointment, a sense of like a stalling in the wind. They're moving forward, moving into this perception, and then they hit this point where they're like, really? I get everything I want anytime I want it? Like, do I help other people with that? Surely if I have these capabilities, it's got to be meant for something. Over time, I've begun to understand what a human response that is. And so now here I am recording a podcast, simultaneously aware that I hope people like the podcast. And at the same time, now aware more than ever of things that I think, that I feel like I want to say, but very concerned about how it will be received by others. Well, here goes. The chorus today brought up a topic that could be considered very straightforward. We are all very aware, particularly in the age of social media, about our obsession with being liked. We have written songs about it, there are entire books coaching about it, regarding sort of our obsession with this instant feedback culture that we have found ourselves in, particularly among younger demographics, I guess you could say, of our societies, where we are constantly posting things and sharing things. And it is sometimes about the sharing, but it's also equally about, for many of us, the response that those shares get. So the number of likes, the attention, the number of followers, etc. What was a non existent metric only a handful of decades ago has now become one of the most important things in many industries. How many followers you have as an individual writer or an individual consultant or an individual of any kind is taken as a measure of your success. This is a very real manifestation. This is a very real thing that we're experiencing today. And so when the chorus says that you have these beliefs about being liked, you have this concept, a human concept as they see it, of being popular. We say, yeah, we understand that. It feels very acute right now. It feels very exacerbated. The way we are experiencing technology and interactions with others, particularly among the rapidly diverging opinions that we are all generating, as we talked about in last week's episode 23 about truth, it seems like there's a lot of this going on right now. People grappling with expressing who they feel they truly are, while also sort of combating slash wanting desperately those expressions to be loved and liked and welcomed. I was reading something on Reddit recently about what it's truly like to live with someone who is a Instagrammer, who has a large following on Instagram. And the stories were, I don't know, potentially what you would expect, that they are rather consumed. A lot of their time and effort is put into constructing this image of themselves that they share on social media. Sometimes it aligns to who the person truly is, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the images are fake, are generated, meaning they think it would be a good idea, it would get a lot of attention for them to do or say or have something. And so they construct a photo opportunity or some sort of background to make it look like that's what they were doing or that's where they were. And as we all know, sometimes it works. They do get the likes, they do get the attention. But what's starting to shift around for many of us who are in this and then who are also observing it is that the likability is starting to mean less than it once did across all industries, across all versions of it in our relationships. And the chorus would say, yes, this is starting to reflect your awakening. When we first arrived here in sort of the five senses environment, or as we have created the experiences of limitation here, one of the things that has been part of the game is our agreement to remain in step with other players. As we've mentioned before, and I think we'll dive into this now a little more deeply, the chorus considers our reality a quote unquote group consensus, meaning all the players of our game agree to sort of fundamental rules of engagement. There are not any tall poppies allowed. There are not many exceptions allowed. We sort of are all here to be limited together and in a particular way together. And so we don't often, until recently, allow many players to do something that's very different than those rules, than those experiences, because that would disrupt the perception of limitation that the rest of us had agreed to. Now, we've talked about in episodes past how, right, if you're walking down the street and you see someone who's levitating, and maybe levitating had never crossed your mind before, Now, by witnessing that manifestation, you are going to build a belief about its possibility. That possibility disrupts your experience of limitation. You are now less limited than you were prior to seeing that thing. And so, as a group, as a consensus, we do not collectively perceive much that is beyond the game, much that is outside the rules of engagement, because it would disrupt the consensus and our experience and our objectives to be limited here. This being in lockstep sort of aspect of our game reflects itself, or maybe I should say, generates itself in many ways across the game board. And one of the ways that it does this is in the concept that the chorus brought up today, which is about likability or being liked. We are all at this juncture well aware of the fact that if we could just tune out the noise, if we could just tune out the opinions and the judgments of others, we might be able to enter into a space where we create truly remarkable things that reflect more of what we each are. This is happening in some corners of the planet and in some different places where individuals are able to somehow gradually or suddenly cast off sort of pre existing ties to their culture or their family or whatever obligations they have and express themselves in a way that would otherwise be rejected by their community, whether it's coming out as a different sexuality, whether it's choosing a career that you know would be rejected by all of those who are in your mesh in your relationships. Whatever that is, there comes a juncture now, a crossroads where people see this choice in a new way. They see that, you know what? I can't deny it anymore. I really just want to do this for a living. I don't want the family business. I really just want to do this thing. And that becomes clear. And then on the other sides of the crossroads, what is also clear is the reason why they are struggling to follow that path. Usually that takes the form of a growing consciousness, a growing awareness of judgments, potential loss of relationships, potential loss of physical things or safety or financial security if you took that path. In some cases, we cut the cords drastically or suddenly and move off in that other direction. In other cases, it can be a very gradual releasing of those things and moving off in the other direction. Or in other cases, it is a denial that that other direction exists and it's a reaffirming or a recommitting to the obligations that prevent us from embracing more of what we are. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, in awakening, it becomes harder and harder and harder to deny the path that is calling you forward, to deny those things that you truly, truly want. What this results in often, as we've talked about in many episodes, is chaos. New energy coming through today is still perceived by humans as chaos because it is very rare that we have had a mental idea of how this all could go and work out perfectly and it's going to be great because these things are so new that they tend to come out of left field. Sometimes when we have those epiphanies where we say like, God, that's it. I want that. I want to be that singer. I want to be that person. I want to start that job. I want to move to that place. It's sort of been there in the background for a while, but then often sometimes it just comes down to earth all of a sudden. And then you're sort of like, now what? What do I do? How do I get there? Which, as we've talked about before in the episode on depression, can sometimes result in that sensation. We get depressed. We get depressed because we get locked into a vibrational eddy where we are aware of this massive thing that we want, but we're also aware of the current place in the five senses manifestations where we are, and we do not by adding up all the five senses manifestations that exist in our life at that time, see how we could possibly get there. And so we get depressed. We feel lost. We feel like an emptiness, a sort of a sadness too, at times, a numbness of we just can't calculate it. It's all too big. As we've said before, though, that experience of depression, that sensation requires an expanding human. It requires that some part of you is aware of those other desires, of those other things that you want. Now, if we go back to that crossroads, I can understand how, from our present human perspective, we would say, well, Katie, the thing we have to jettison is this need to be liked. If I was at a crossroads and to my one side was this pure, amazing desire expression of who I am, and then in the other direction is sort of keeping obligations that I've already made and wanting to be liked, wanting to be loved and received by those people. And I know they'll reject me if I go in the other way. It might be easy for us to fall back on what we often do in the five senses world, which is get rid of. We get rid of the stuff that we don't want. We try and push it away, and we try and smash it or bury it or pretend it didn't exist. In many ways, we work to reject the thing that we don't want as a means to free us up to move in the direction that we do want. Now, as the Course has described, what that does energetically, is it energizes the experience of needing to reject things. And even if you reject issue number one, what will crop up in its place are issues 2 and 3, because you have simply been energizing the idea, the experience, the concept of needing to reject. Okay, so maybe we don't want to do that at the crossroads, right? We're trying to successfully move in the direction of all the things that we want and want to be. And how do we get there if we recognize that we're being held down or tied to these beliefs that we have that drive us to make decisions that will remain in lockstep with the consensus, that drive us to want to be liked? I mean, don't we all want that on some level? Wouldn't you love to sit down and compose a song and just feel your own infinite love for yourself and not have to worry about if anyone's going to buy the song or if you're going to make money or if it's going to be liked or if it's going to lead to a contract? Or you feel it, don't you? You feel the momentum of the beliefs inside of you. Okay, but before we sort of answer, quote unquote, answer this question, because I don't know that we ever answer questions on this show. We talk about like why, we talk about different perspectives. But as you know, the chorus and the universe are full of diverse perspectives, and so are we. And so that we present different ways of looking at it, really the answer's up to you. It's your choice. You decide which perspective you like best. Okay, so let's continue with different perspectives on this topic because we are acutely aware of our human current perspective on this, which is, goddamn, we really need to be liked. We really want to be popular. We really want to be famous even. And yet we can sense how that is constricting our ability to be us and to be ourselves. And so we just want to cut the cord to everybody else. We just want to be left alone. Okay. That is a valid perspective. 100%. But what might be a different perspective on these beliefs and what's happening? What was the chorus saying to us today? As you've probably picked up on by now, the chorus thinks that everything that we created here in our experience of limitation is nothing short of amazing. So when we have this perspective from within the game and we're like, get us out of here, we're starting to perceive something that's more expanded and better. And we want that. Can you please I'm ready. Just hit the eject button. I'm done. Get me out of the game. From the chorus's perspective, looking down at us in the game, they think that nothing is more amazing or more astonishing or more incredible or more colossal or more magnificent, or I could go on. And they started the message today that way, didn't they? They said, we're with you and we observe you and we're aware of you. And did you know that you're kind of the headline show right now in the universe? Everybody's watching. You guys are teaching us stuff about energy and life and creation. Every single second that you exist in the game, you are generating new and incredible things that reverberate through the galaxies. How's that for having impact? But of course, from their perspective, they see the impact of our beliefs or the energy and the way the beliefs construct our reality in much broader ways. The breadth, the effect of the ways that we have to remain in lockstep in this game are felt, are experienced in underlying ways all the time, not just when you're writing a song. And one of these ways is in an experience that humans have of a thing called gravity. Now, already, just having said that, something just came up within me that was like, you are so far beyond your pay grade. I'm not a physicist. I don't have a PhD. I read books about it. I tried to understand it. I tried to understand it in my own way. But I am nowhere near a human expert on the topic of gravity from the perspective of science. But I and you and we all are experts on gravity from the perspective of being the generative force of it. Everything I'm about to share is a perspective. It is not a truth. Truth is yours to decide. Everything I'm about to say is an option. And if it resonates with you, then take what you want of it. And if it doesn't, then don't. Or maybe you will sense something like I have through all of my years with the chorus, that I seem to find an element of truth in every perspective that I encounter. It hasn't been about picking the right perspectives. It's about seeing the concepts and the connective pieces between them all. Today, we understand gravity to be a sort of invisible force that permeates the universe. Its effects are calculated based upon the gravitational constant and the mass and the distance of the objects involved. And from a certain vantage point, this is true. From a five senses game piece perspective, this is a way to understand this force that acts upon us. Now, for those of the rest of us who maybe slept through physics as I did in school, or it's been a long time since we even heard any of these concepts described from a scientific vantage point, you yourself experience gravity in a very visceral, very in your face way all day, every day. Gravity is the force that keeps us appended to the game board. Our physical reality, as we know it, as we experience it, is what we call planet Earth. And though we may have and may someday leave it, that's not often in our consciousness day to day. We're here. We're here working our jobs, doing our things, reveling in the experience of limitation. And gravity is the glue. Gravity is the fabric that keeps us all here together. It wouldn't be as limiting if you could float up into the air 20 feet, if you could magically fly to other parts of the planet. It wouldn't be the same experience of limitation. But more than that, we wouldn't be stuck here together in the same way. Gravity is the force that sort of ripples through the rest of our sensory perceptions. It is by gravity that I am able to perceive you with my eyes, because you and I are standing on the same piece of ground, and you are not floating off into space somewhere else. It is by gravity that the atmosphere is held against planet Earth, through which sound waves more easily travel, and I am able to hear your voice. It is through the effects of gravity that I must exert force to lift things up, to move things around, to roll my trash can out to the curb. And it is through the effects of gravity that we often manifest much of the deterioration of the aging process that we came here to experience. We sag and we curve and we hobble. It is true, we can understand gravity as a force that holds planets in orbits and has many effects throughout the observable universe. But really, when we bring it all back down to Earth, gravity is one of the primary manifestations of existence in our game. Some of you may recall Einstein's famous equation of E equals mc squared. Now, for those of us who, again, may not clearly remember why that equation was so important, somehow it continues to crop up in our mass consciousness, in our group consensus, I should say, that somehow this guy Einstein and the thing that he talked about just keeps showing up every now and then on posters, or it's talked about even beyond scientific circles. Now, from a certain perspective, you could say that that's because, well, it's a really important equation in physics, and it really fundamentally altered the way that we are understanding our environment. And this is true. Or you could also, from the chorus's perspective, look at it as another example of our awakening. The equation E equals mc squared is known as energy equivalence, meaning E, energy, is equal to mass times the speed of light. This was groundbreaking in its simplicity because it pointed out that all matter is energy. Those of us who are spiritually inclined would be nodding vigorously. The law of attraction and many of these teachings point to the fact that everything around us is energy. And in fact, this teaching has been around in some circles for many thousands of years. But what's interesting was that through Einstein, what we brought to ourselves was a mainstream concept of this idea. It was something that so fit into our context that we were able to redefine or rebase our scientific understanding of our own experience here because of it. What once may have been a more fringe idea was now nothing less than scientific principle. As we have talked about before, our group consensus allows in the perception of exceptions when the consensus is ready for the appearance of that thing. What is first remarked upon by one or two people at the periphery gradually sinks its way into the belief system game-wide until it is adopted and understood by all players of the game. We know this well, from the structure of scientific revolutions to jokes about business ideas and innovation. We know that first, there's a lot of resistance to new ideas, and then Everyone talks about it as if it had always been that way. This is an energetic thing. New ideas are often adopted in a gradual process until they become part of the fundamental fabric of the belief systems that we all embody and experience here. E equals mc squared was a culmination, an embodiment, consensus wide of the idea that all matter is energy. Now, how does this relate to the chorus's message today about popularity? Is it that electrons and protons are very popular here in our reality? Perhaps. But it actually has more to do with the lowercase m in that equation, mass. If you listen to episode 20 on the mind body instrument, then you know that from the chorus's perspective, our bodies and our minds are viewed by them as one unified system. This dynamic interplay between what we think and then how we feel it through the physical instrument are, in their view, the same thing. These work hand in hand, and they cannot, from their distant perspective, perhaps separate them and delineate them and make them more specific in the ways that we do by saying, well, eyesight comes from eyes and hearing comes from ears. They say, well, it's all basically an output of your beliefs. And that is the generative force, from their perspective, of this experience of physical reality, this instrument, this mind body instrument that we have, that we use to perceive all of this stuff, is based on our beliefs. Similarly, today, they're talking about another belief, a belief of needing to be liked and approved and in step with all other players of the game. Now, if you put these two concepts together, from the chorus's perspective, what you might be able to say is, hey guys, you all have beliefs about needing to be liked and needing to be approved by each other in order to survive in the game, in order to thrive in the game, we might say. And that belief is part of your mind body instrument expression. All your beliefs are. All the things that you believe and that we've been talking about here on the show, from trust to control to all the other things that are sometimes conscious to us and sometimes still not, are what are integrated into the expression that you call your physical bodies. And something that we experience with our physical bodies here is a force that we call gravity. And you might say, wait a second, Katie. That's different. Gravity is a force outside of us. It's a force that goes through the whole universe. And then there's our physical instruments. And you know by now that I would say that is a valid perspective. But from another equally valid perspective, you could say that the only way we experience gravity today is through the mind body instrument. And that it could be that just like we separated eyesight into eyes and sound into ears, we have separated from ourselves the concept of gravity into a force that permeates the universe, as opposed to something that is generated by our energetic basis, which is our resonance with the frequencies of disallowance, which created this reality and this mind body instrument. Energy is mass, and mass is part of the equation of gravity. And so if you back up the chain far enough to the chorus's perspective, The chorus would say, your experience of gravity, your experience of mass is driven by your energetic basis, the very first manifestation of which is your beliefs. And today, one of the beliefs that they were pointing out that plays a key role, we might say, but not the only role in the experience of gravity. There are many beliefs that combine into our belief that we're stuck here on this rock together. But one of the key beliefs that contributes to that is our need to remain in lockstep, is our need to be liked and approved of by others. As we have said, if you didn't feel those beliefs, if those weren't part of your reality, you know that you would create incredible things. And that is because you would be able to perceive more broadly your own connection to the infinite. Rather than needing the approval of others, you would find within yourself an endless sensation of approval. That feeling that we have sometimes hoped to get from the compliments or the love of others would be instantly achieved within yourself. Your ears might have perked up today in the chorus's message when they said it becomes self-generating, meaning there's nothing else you need from other people in order to sustain that sensation. You don't need to keep putting out songs that are top hits to continue to feel good about yourself. But what did that do? It kept us tied in to the group consensus. You don't need to continually receive likes on your Instagram feed in order to feel that self-confidence. It becomes self-generating. But what did that belief bring us to? A time and a place where we all had to stay here together and we all had to agree and find ways to agree in a beautiful experience of limitation where our perception of our own connection to the infinite was diminished. As usual in awakening, if you look around today, what you might start to see is evidence that this belief and these beliefs are softening. We are having interesting experiences of not quite believing anymore that the approval of others is all that we thought it was. Sometimes now we create something and it receives rave reviews, but we didn't love it and we didn't think it was all that great. And we have a sensation that we now even have a name for, which is called a hollow victory. It doesn't feel great. What's that about? You have all the approval, you have all the likes from all sorts of people all over the world, but you don't feel that feeling. And then what do we also have? What we've talked about so far today, which is we create something that we love, that we think is incredible, and nobody else likes it, or nobody else sees how incredible it is like we do. And we feel a sense of frustration and shame and disappointment that brings us to a place of being sort of questioning of why the hell did I care so much about what they thought? Both of these are powerful experiences of awakening because in both cases, what is being put into question is our own beliefs in the need for the approval of others. It doesn't always bring us what we thought it would when we get it, and it doesn't always feel like a thing we want to be obligated to when we don't. And what we might find in the years to come is that the experience of gravity also begins to soften. That we will begin to manifest ideas, solutions, and experiences where gravity isn't such a Loctite force the way that we thought it was. It's more flexible. It's more fluid. It's less capable of holding us down here together. We will discover how to fly, not because we find anti gravity, but because we embody new and different beliefs that do not require us to be locked here in step anymore at all. When you are flying under the self-generative power of your own approval and love, you will come back down to earth when you want to. Let's go back to that crossroads for just a minute, especially in case you are at one right now, where in one direction is something new and different that you want, that feels deeply to be a part of you. And in the other direction are obligations, you could say, are relationships, people that you might lose or who might reject you if you go in that new direction. We don't really want to be anti their approval because we don't want to energize more things of needing to be anti of. And so instead, what you might have noticed cropping up across humanity in recent decades is this idea that it'll be worth it to others. That I'm going to go in this direction and I'm going to take this hard road because eventually it'll be in service to all those others who were potentially in the opposite direction on the crossroads. In many ways, this is an expansion because you're no longer perhaps denying what it is that you want, and you're also not denying their rejection of it. And so, in a way, it allows you to move forward down that path while still holding the door open for their eventual approval. From the chorus's perspective, what might be the next energetic expansion in these relationships? What might be the next way to look at it? What if we're all in on this together? What if there are some of us who agreed to sort of hold the game board in place, to continue to embody those ideas of needing to be liked and needing to be in lockstep in order to succeed and survive, while others went ahead and began to awaken to these beliefs that we have held here, who would begin to move in the direction of their infinite selves, who would start to come into contact with expanded ideas that would free us from the experience, the glorious experience of limitation that we had, in order to most intentionally and most lovingly keep the entire game intact. The manifestations may not show this. It may look like rejection in that moment. But what if, from a larger perspective, we're actually all doing this together? Besides, as the chorus said today, you're already famous. You already have a fan club, larger than we yet understand. There are already beings surrounding you who love and adore everything you are doing here every minute of your day. And they are so excited to see you take off. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you found these messages to be helpful. May they accelerate you on your path wherever you'd like it to go. For more information, check out our website at katieandthechorus.com. There you will find show quotes, episode transcripts, details on our book, The Book of Human Awakening, as well as our newsletter sign up. Visit katieandthechorus.com. Thanks again. See you next time.